Hello and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be painting a nuthatch on a 10 by 10 inch canvas panel in acrylics, and this is going to be an impressionist style painting, so lots of beautiful loose brushstrokes. So I hope you enjoy it. Now let's get painting. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is give the entire canvas a coat of gloss gel medium acrylic. It can be matte, it doesn't matter, it can be any kind of medium, just so long as it seals the pores of the canvas. That's all it's there to do. And then I'm going to put some burnt sienna and some raw umber into that wet medium, and then once it's completely dry I can then start to go in and put in some of the darker details. Now this is going to be an impressionist painting, as I've said, so the only details I want to put is around the bird's head area and perhaps a little bit on feet. The rest of it is going to be really quite nice and loose. So it's not going to be a realistic painting at all, but it's going to have a certain amount of realism. If you paint correctly with impressionism, if you get the colours correct and the shapes correct, it will look real without you actually having to paint any detail. Just so long as you've got those colours mixed accurately and the places where you put them, the positioning of the brush stroke is all important in impressionist style painting. So I'm just knocking in the basic shapes now and basic colours with a large 1-inch flat bristle brush. Notice I'm not using a nylon brush. It produces too regular kind of a brush stroke, a nylon brush. It's too smooth. I like a bristle brush to give me that lovely rough character to the brush stroke, that messy feel. I like to start messy, as you all know if you've seen some of my earlier videos. Start messy, and the messier the better, and then slowly build the painting up from there. Refine it here and there where you want it to be refined. So I'm just going to scratch my name in the bottom left corner, as I usually do, into the wet paint. And then carry on with the background. I want this to be dark here, but also light enough to show that branch off the bottom of the branch, and it's going to have a light top so I can really make that stand out where the lighter parts of the branch are. And then the bird is going to stand out quite nicely, because I want the bottom area of the bird to be quite dark, so that's going to stand out against that lighter background. You have to think about your contrasts as you're painting, with light against dark, dark against light, and keep repeating that throughout the painting. Light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So you can see there I've got the lower part of the branch, or the behind it, is light, then the bottom part of the branch is dark, the top part of the branch is light, the bird is going to be dark against that light background. So constantly think about those things as you're painting. Now that first layer is actually dried, so I'm just going over it again in that background to put in a little bit more refined background. Now I've gone to a slightly smaller brush now with a Payne's grey and white tone to give me a nice bluish tone, because they have a bluish hue to their fur, to their feather on the back and the head. These nuthatches do, so and it's going to be quite warm on the chest here. I'm using this small brush because it's a relatively small area, but it means I can apply these little brush marks over the entire area, and then when it's dry I'll go over it again with different colours, different brush marks, but it will add to that interest. And that's what's important about painting, impressionist painting or any kind of painting with acrylics, is to paint in layers. Paint one layer, let it dry, and paint another layer over the top, And the whole interest will add and slowly build up. It'll create interest. Each layer upon layer will create interest. You must also learn to paint quickly with acrylics. If you can learn to paint quickly, then the paint doesn't dry so quickly, if you know what I mean. You've got time to blend things, should you need to. So, I'm loosely blending here because that paint is still wet. And generally, takes a good 5 to 10 minutes to dry. And this is because I applied that acrylic gel or acrylic medium in the very, very outset of the painting, right at the beginning. That seals the pores of the canvas and stops the canvas from being so absorbent. So when I paint over the top with an acrylic, it can't absorb into the canvas. It can only evaporate, which is a slower process than absorption. So the paint will stay wet for a little bit longer. And that's the other reason I do it. It just allows acrylic painting to be a little bit easier. So give that a try. I'm just loosely knocking in some little areas of interest on this branch to make it stand out. I need to get a little bit more yellow in that part of the branch there. So it's got a greenish tint to it. Now once it's completely dry, I'll give it a spray of water, and this time I'm going over with some acrylic golden open gloss medium. Now golden open paint is very, very good for slow drying. It's 2 or 3 times the length of a normal acrylic paint to dry. So, and once it's dried or semi-dry, if you go over the top with a wet paint, you can actually move that paint underneath. It reactivates it. So this should be a nice way of blending paint, is with this golden open medium. You can use matte, it doesn't matter. I've just got a gloss here at the moment because that's what I've got to hand. But it does the same thing. It allows the paint to dry slower. So all these little brush strokes now can start to blend smoothly in with each other. So I'm going over this background again, once again. And this time I've gone down to a smaller brush now, at this point, this stage, to do some impressionist foliage type marks. So I'm not painting individual leaves, but just areas to make it look like there's foliage there. They're giving the impression of foliage without actually painting it. And that's what impressionism is all about. Creating the impression. Just lighten that area there under the branch just so that it stands out a bit more. Refine this area under the bird in the background. Basically I'm using white, Payne's grey, a bit of yellow ochre and a tiny bit of raw umber there just to create those colours in the background. Try and simplify your palette at all times. Try and keep it simple and you won't go far wrong. Basically, if you have too many colours, you can confuse yourself very, very easily, but also the painting will be very confused. Keep it simple. Limit yourself to one yellow, one red, one blue, in my case I'm using Payne's grey, and white. And that should be all you need, really. I mean, I do have 1 or 2 other colours I tend to dip into every now and again, like a cadmium yellow dark, or a cadmium orange, or even a phthalo blue. But those are rare occasions when I do use those. Keep it simple, you won't go wrong. Okay, with this same little small brush here, it's not that little, and it's not neat and tidy, it's an old worn brush. I'm just putting in a few little highlighted areas and little marks, again adding onto those layers building up the layers bit by bit. I need to lighten that area on the side of the bird there where the sunlight's catching it, or the light, and then also on the top of the head. Now I will go over these areas a few times before I've got them correct, before they're to my liking. I'll just put in a few little shapes on the wings. I'm just giving the hint of wings and the sort of details that's in them without actually painting details. I don't want to get bogged down too much in the photographic realism of an animal when I'm painting it. I just want to create that loose effect, which also adds to the movement of the bird. It gives the bird movement if you can paint loose. If you paint realistic and detailed and use tiny brushes all the time, then it's going to look more like an illustration rather than a painting. And they're two separate things entirely. And I do know that for a fact because for many years I was an illustrator and a photorealistic painter, and it took me probably about 15 years to really get to understand how to paint loose. And what I'm trying to do now is to give you my experience over those years that I've learned, the techniques I've learned in order to paint loose. And there's a few basic things to remember. Always use a bigger brush than you think, and be bold with your paintbrush strokes. Don't hold except when you're using a fine brush like this, don't hold the paintbrush right up near the ferrule, right up near the bristle end. Use it a bit further down and your paintbrush stroke will become much more relaxed and free and loose the further you hold the paintbrush away from the end. Which is why a lot of oil painting brushes are long handled, so you can hold them right at the end. I mean, that's what they're there for. That's what the length of the handle is for. So use it. Otherwise you may as well just cut the thing in half and just use the front end of the paintbrush. No. Use the whole brush. Except when you're doing small areas like this where I need to find that little bit of detail. I'm only putting a little bit of detail here in the bird itself and mainly the face. So that's where I'm going to be using these small brushes. You can see elsewhere in the bird I'm not actually doing detail. It's just little paintbrush marks that can look like there's detail from a distance without actually painting those details. Okay, now I can just darken this area now on the bird because those reds were a little bit too bright. The warmth's in there. And now I'm going in with a lighter colour for the chest with this rake brush, which is a fantastic brush for doing this kind of work. There's several brushes I think you really need to get to know and get to use, and that's the rake brush, the dagger brush and the fan brush. Those three brushes, oh, and the rigger brush, which is a liner brush, are very, very useful tools, because that's what brushes are. They're tools for you to use to create the right marks. So get to learn those brushes, understand them, find out what they can do, because each brush can make different marks. One brush can make a lot of different marks just by the way you hold it. In fact, one of the most important things about using a brush is not necessarily the way you hold it, but the pressure that you use when using it. You can use it lightly or you can use it hard. You can scrub with it. There's all sorts of ways you can use it, so experiment. Just get one brush and experiment with different levels of pressure, and you'll see what I mean. Just on a piece of scrap paper, just have a go. And you'll see it can do all sorts of different things. I'm just putting some really lighter details, or lighter areas now, in the face and on the beak, just bringing the colours out there, they're bringing the highlights out. A little bit more. And putting the darks back in as well where I've lost them on that beak. And also I'm going to do the same with the leg here because it was getting lost in that background. So I'll put the darks back in. Now that stands out. Now you've noticed I've not done the details of the actual toes because it's not important. This is impressionist painting, and you know that a bird has claws and toes. So what I'm doing here is I'm making the impression of those feet, legs and claws and toes. I'm not actually painting them detailed. So your mind makes that up. The viewer makes that up in their own mind. So they create the feet in their own mind, basically. And it's the same with any other subject, whether it's a tree, a landscape, you know, a waterfall. If you do it impressionist style, it's all about the viewer making that up in their own mind. A few little highlights now with that fan brush, a rough, worn, bristle fan brush. Again, a great useful tool for impressionist style. Back to the rake brush and just put one or two more of these little details in. It allows you to do loads of details in one brush stroke. And then a little bit of smoothing for that chest area there. And then a little bit of warmth in the rest of the body, just here and there, not everywhere, just to give it a bit more interest. A few blues with the same brush and lighter areas on that coloured back of the bird. Like that, and it's not far off finished now. I'm just going to put in a few little branches, just qualify those branches a little bit more, make them look a little bit sharper. I'll put one there, and I think I'll have another one over at there, and I'll put a little light on there so you can see the highlight of the twig. Now some very, very light highlights now. This is like pure white, little dots of light here and there, just to bring out the highlights of those little toes and feet and its claws. And then I'll do the same on the actual bird itself, the body, on the head, once again qualifying those light areas, going over them until they're as bright as I want them to be. A little bit of colour into those feet added once again because it just lost it, so just a little bit more colour. A couple of dark areas again just to make them stand out against that background. And you can just keep fiddling with the painting until you've got it right, until you've got it how you want it. That's the beauty of acrylic paint. You can do that very, very easily. A few more little tiny little marks of light now with this little brush. Like I said, that's the only part of the bird that's got detail. And a few more little highlights on the beak, just to make that stand out a little bit more. And then I'll do a few little brush strokes elsewhere, and then when I'm happy with that, that's the painting finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and hopefully found it rewarding and entertaining. Let me know if you have any comments or questions that I may be able to help you with. And I look forward to you joining me on my next painting video. So until then, have a lovely day and happy painting!